This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on 3 years of PM Svanidhi, a transformational microcredit scheme for street vendors. The participants are SHUBOMOY Bhattacharjee and VAIDYANATHan IYER, economic analysts. Moderator is OMVESH UPADHYAY.
To protect the livelihood of street vendors post-COVID and regulate street vending, in June 2020, the Union Government launched the collateral-free microloan scheme PM Svanidhi at subsidized interest rates. Earlier, valid till March 2022, last year the scheme was extended till December of 2024. It has quickly become one of the fastest growing microcredit schemes of the Indian government. Yesterday, speaking on the 3-year milestone of PM Svanidhi, Union Minister Hardeep Puri said that the scheme has led an unparalleled wave of financial inclusion and digital literacy in Indian cities and towns that has provided dignity and stability to street vendors. And today, to discuss about this scheme, its significance and how it has strengthened the street vendors of India, we are joined by economic analysts SHUBOMOY Bhattacharjee and VAIDYANATHan IYER. Welcome to the program, Mr. Bhattacharjee and Mr. IYER.
Thank you.
So, begin the discussion. My question is to you, Mr. IYER, that I want to share some stats what Union Minister yesterday talked about also, and I would request you to draw an overview from that and explain that to our listeners that if we talk about the stats as per of June this year, 65 lakh loan applications were received since the launch of the scheme, of which 48 lakh applications involving 6,000 crore were sanctioned and 47 lakh application amounting to 5,800 crore were dispersed. So, can you please draw an overview from the numbers and share the significance of PM Svanidhi scheme?
Yeah, I think, there are a couple of things to this. Say, for instance, just based on the numbers, we are talking about a country of a size of 120 crores. So, say about, 50 lakh, even if you consider that, about 50 lakh, 55 lakh street vendors have benefited from the Svanidhi scheme. It is remarkable. But these are all the scheme when it started. It was for street vendors who are registered with, respective urban local bodies. So I would imagine that the total number of street vendors in India must be a multiple of these. These are all registered vendors, right? And these can be vendors from, somebody who sells snacks like samosas or pakoras and tea, to a cobbler, to a laundry guy, to, the whole breadth of street vendors that are available in India. And this is also again in the in urban cities and the peripheries of urban areas. So it is a very focused scheme biased towards urban areas, street vendors in urban areas. So I think, and the quantum of loans extended, as you said, is about 6,000 crores. And the amount, as we all know, is like, they get about 10,000 rupees, which is a very nominal amount, but it is a working capital amount. So, say if he has to buy atta dal or whatever, aloo for his samosas, the dough for his samosas and the oil for his samosas for a month, he requires some money. So this serves as working capital to run that business. So, and it was all started, the context is that it all started during COVID times. So COVID was a time of huge distress. It was started sometime in July, if I'm not wrong, and it has continued for 3 years because there is some bit of distress even now among urban areas because I'm looking at, say, NREGA numbers of, say, April, which shows the numbers are high. So I'm imagining, or I might assume that not everybody has come back to work in the urban cities. So I think, so this comes as some kind of a boost that, I can run my business. It is still a small percentage to oil the economic machinery in urban cities because, we all of us who live in urban areas cannot do without these services which are provided by street vendors. It could be, selling of footwear. It could be, as you said, as we all know that, selling of chai. So I think these are remarkable numbers. And the best part is that, there is a gradation to it. If you pay 10,000 rupees in EMIs over 1 year, then you get eligible for a higher loan. So you can scale up also. So I think that way it is quite a remarkable scheme. And also in some ways it is also a digitization record of, transactions which happen by the street vendors. These are recorded and then it kind of forms a credit history of the street vendor. So I think that it has got multi dimensions. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if we look back at the last 3 years of PM Svanidhi scheme, my next question is to Mr. Bhattacharjee, that how has the scheme contributed to the empowerment and financial inclusion of street vendors in India? How do you see that in the progress of the scheme right till now?
If I say that this is a useful scheme, that is just saying nothing. This is a very, very important scheme of this sort. The challenge for the scheme is, as we have pointed out initially, of the 65 lakh people, and which Mr. IYER was also pointing out, is that it is typically it goes to the lowest income group of the economy, which is where you actually would want the money to reach. So instead of giving doles, as this scheme does, it doesn't give dole. Instead, it is giving people the money to invest. So that means that the money has a practical application, which I think is a great idea. A dole always creates a problem. Saying that, I give you a poor, so I give you a cash support and you do whatever you want to do, doesn't really help. Instead, since the scheme encourages the investee to basically take out that money to create a business of any sort, basically is a very, very, what I should call a very productive way. It creates a very correct set of incentives. People at the poor level don't necessarily want to stay at the dole. They want the chance to go up in life. And the way to grow up is to be able to get that initial capital. So the capital can be raised from 10,000 in the second tranche, it goes up to 20,000 and goes up to 50,000 in the third tranche. Those are brilliant. I think it's an idea that really is something very useful. And I must say that the reason why this has been successful is because, as Mr. IYER was pointing out, is because of the digitalization of the economy. Because banks or any other institutions are not particularly very clued in, so to say, about the people who really can't become a bank, who can't open a strong loan account with the bank. But here, the digital economy, the digital framework that has been created by the government of India is actually allowing those people to be identified. And here, a very interesting thing is happening. If you look at the PMS dashboard, you find a very fascinating number that's happening across India. What is this happening? Now, typically, let's look at a state like, say, Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh has got eligible applications of almost 10 lakh. Now, okay, Madhya Pradesh has got some poor people, some not so poor people, but 10 lakhs if we take that number. And if you look at Bihar, you see that the number of applications is just 1.25 lakh. If you go further down into Jharkhand, you see the applications falls even lower to 72,000. Now, what's happening here? If you look at further towards the west of India, towards Rajasthan, the number again climbs back to 1,71,000. Gujarat, 5 lakh. What essentially is showing is that again the same challenge that has come up in other schemes is also coming up here. That states which are got a strong state administration, states which are able and are willing to support their people and are standing behind the people, are therefore pushing the people to attain the Svanidhi, going for the Svanidhi schemes. Whereas typically the states which are typically the poorest ones, where you would expect more people to apply, because obviously it is nobody's case that Bihar has got 1/10 the number of poor people that Madhya Pradesh has. But what is happening? That in the Bihar, the state government, and I would presume that I'm fairly correct out here, is not pushing the people adequately to take advantage of this robust scheme. So this weakness at the state level is a very major weakness of the scheme, which actually is a very powerful scheme. And this is where the central government is hamstrung. The central government can only give out the scheme. It can ask all the states. It will naturally be uniform across the states. But you typically look at what's happening is, if you look at the countrywide dispersal, that the states which are doing well economically are also the states where the maximum number of people are coming up for as applicants. And while that is obviously to be expected, because these states have got more entrepreneurial people, what it does show is that the states which are at the poorest level need a support at this stage. And after 3 years of Svanidhi doing well, I think this is something that we'll need to be looking at more closely. Yes.
You very rightly said about the strong administration and how it promotes people to come forward and take the place to be where they deserve. And that we have seen in union government as well when it initiated the PM Svanidhi. So now on to a newer aspect and more important one, that how PM Svanidhi scheme had created an impact on the overall economy particularly in terms of employment generation and economic growth. My question is to you, Mr. Bhattacharjee.
It is definitely very powerful, as I say. Remember one thing, that in the scheme of administration of the country, the central government, by its very nature, looks at very major macro issues. Issues which are interstate issue nature, which are basically not last mile delivery. So if you want, for instance, health to improve, or if you want education to improve, which are the last mile issues, those have to be handled by the state. Now, the central government, of course, here in the Svanidhi scheme has done something very good. It has said, look, I'm not going to wait for the states to start thinking of such a scheme. Instead, I create the scheme, and as Mr. IYER rightly pointed out, that it was created in the most distressed time of the COVID impact. So the central government comes in and says that, look, this is a scheme that I want to be pushed as far as possible, and therefore it should be created. So the numbers clearly show, in terms of, let's look at the sanction amount, 6,125 crore. This is a very big amount. If you look at the multiplier effect of that amount, this is a huge multiplier. Every rupee that you spend on the poorest has a multiplier of at least 2.5 to 3. So it will be creating a multiplier effect of something like 18,000. At the poorest level of the income group, these are fascinating, what I might call, ladders that you are creating for these people to climb up the economic ability. In fact, as Svanidhi expands more and more, I would expect that the central government would actually find more interesting ways to bring in other benefits and other schemes to tie up with this to create sort of a virtuous cycle. That is what I shall be expecting soon. Yes.
So now the question is same to you, Mr. IYER, that when you look at PM Svanidhi and its impact on the overall economy, particularly in terms of employment generation and economic growth, what's your say on that?
It's very similar. I'm sure that, say, Svanidhi right now, even if I say 5 million people, just 5 million street vendors. So I think to the extent that, but if you just look at, I was just reading in one of the press statements of the Government of India about how the number of, say, digital transactions that have happened by street vendors who are covered probably by Svanidhi is about, say, 75,000 crores. So I thought that was quite a remarkable number. If this is the kind of volume of business that has been generated by just about, say, 5 million street vendors who are registered with, urban local bodies. So that is a very, very remarkable amount of business. And the other interesting aspect which, I thought SHUBOMOY highlighted was about, this is not a dole out. It is an interest subsidy. And look at what the interest subsidy actually has cost the government. It has cost the government less than 100 crores, if I'm not wrong, from what I have some numbers that again put out by the government. So it is a least cost intervention, low cost intervention, but with a huge multiplier effect. So, and my sense is, given the less NPAs in this scheme, non-performing assets or, bad loans, the numbers are pretty low. Only in the second year, from what we had reported through RTIs and all, only the second year when India was facing a very horrible second wave of COVID, that is in 21-22, did we see a large number of NPA accounts in the Svanidhi scheme. Otherwise, in the first year and the third year, the number of third year being this year, that is 2022-23, ending March of 2023, the bad loan accounts have been very low. So a least cost intervention, a less budgetary outgo, a huge multiplier, and it also gives me a sense or, encouragement for government or to public sector banks to expand this. So my sense is that this is one scheme which can be massively expanded and can be expanded beyond urban areas. So right now, if it is just in major cities, I don't think, it goes to tier 2, tier 3. Like, if mutual funds can be sold in 120 cities today, I don't know why this Svanidhi scheme should not expand to 120 cities. In my mind, I'm just thinking. So I think there is scope for expansion because the cost is low. Second, the NPAs or the bad loans are low in this scheme. And the number of transactions, several of these, 10,000 odd street vendors are now on, say, Swiggy and Zomato, if that is what documented. And, these guys have sold about, 25, 30 crore worth wares on the online platform. So this must have happened over the last 6 months or so. So there is this aspect of, spreading out. So I think what it can create, the ripple effect in the economy is quite remarkable. So hence, I think, the scheme can be ambitiously expanded.
Absolutely. And among the few key features, it is already seen as that how and why the NPAs are this low, because there are also timely rewards or perks of paying EMI or their installments on time in the form of some subsidy. And then there's also some rewards and paybacks when you choose the digital mode of payment. So I want to take views of Mr. Bhattacharjee in this, that continuous upgradation of your some amount, total amount that you can take as loan is from 10,000 to 20,000, now recently upgraded to 50,000. And with these subsidies and digital moment paid concession, how do you see that these steps help in getting the loan back?
Loan back, I do travel with several microfinance institutions in Bihar. I do that annually every year. And I have noticed that in the lower income groups, there's a very strong feeling that loans have to be repaid. So loan repayment is not going to be a problem. Indian ethos I looked at with disdain at somebody who has not repaid loan. So therefore, I don't think this sector will ever be in a problem of loans not overwhelmingly not being repaid. Also, you notice that the scheme has got what I should say support, like it's a socially, the persons who take out the loan, typically his or her community gets to see which is who's taking out the loan. So therefore, and altogether there's a model suasion. What I would now expect and for this scheme to expand would be, which I was saying, and that I think is a very good idea, that it should now be stretched out, since the ticket size is small and banks typically do not have very good reach. It should be stretched out to other institutions, microfinance institutions for one, NBFCs, even mutual funds, anybody else, LIC, whoever wants to and should be encouraged to. Probably they can even be goaded to that you set apart a certain part of your transaction as part of the PM Svanidhi scheme, so that they really more and more people across the country are able to see the signboard of this Svanidhi scheme and reach out. Because in lots of places, you will not find typically the banks, but you find the NBFCs, you find the NBFC MFIs, you find all sorts of other institutions there. So why shouldn't they be part of the Svanidhi scheme? I understand SIDBI is pretty much in favor of that sort of an idea, and I think that should be really be pushed. It also helps because their choice of beneficiaries will be very useful. As you know, many of these NBFCs and others maintain an extensive dossier of their people who take loans from them for other schemes. So they know their constituency very well. Given that circumstance, the NPA problem would be even lower with them, because they'll be able to chase these loans better. They'll be able to work out these loans. Essentially, what I'm saying is that banking in India has fortunately now realized that it can be worked out in different models than what used to be happening in, say, European countries and others, where, you sort of treated a bank and waited for customers to come in. Here, this is a question of stepping out. Now, that stepping out has taken us several decades to reach that position, that from banks or financial institutions to those who will take the loans. But since it started happening, and since banks are not the best ones to be able to do it, I'll be very strongly urging that it should now be extended to across all sorts of organizations to take it on. Since the ticket sizes are small, the hit on their finances and balance sheets will be very low, and it actually will be very useful to spread the word across in every community, in every income group. Yes.
Absolutely. And before we take the discussion forward, let's listen to what Union Minister of Urban Affairs and Petroleum and Natural Gas, Shri Hardeep Puri, said at the 3-year milestone anniversary of PM Svanidhi. Speaking at the event, Mr. Puri highlighted the significance of the scheme and also shared the future ambitions with PM Svanidhi. He said,
जब प्रधानमंत्री जी ने इस स्कीम की शुरुआत की तो उन्होंने कहा कि स्वनिधि योजना का उद्देश्य स्ट्रीट वेंडर्स के भीतर स्वरोजगार, स्वावलंबन, स्वाभिमान को बहाल करना है. This was one of the fastest rolled out schemes of any government anywhere. So I think what this scheme has done, quite apart from the financial inclusion, quite apart from the fact that we have converted them into micro entrepreneurs and provided the best example of the microfinance scheme anywhere, if I would say. I think this now scheme is being studied in other countries also. But we have provided them a stability, and that stability and the dignity means once the message is gone कि हमारे प्रधानमंत्री जी की योजना है तो हमारी जो लोकल अथॉरिटीज भी हैं उनका जो बिहेवियरल स्कीम रोल आउट हैज बीन वेरी गुड बट दिस इज वर्क इन प्रोग्रेस. हम इसकी 5th एनिवर्सरी मनाएंगे. स्कीम का स्कोप की आउटरीच विल बी इवन बिगर एंड वी वुड हैव really done something in this sector which was hitherto unthinkable.
And so now on the same line, Mr. Iyer, how do you analyze the long-term implications of the scheme for the street vending sector in India, if we may say so, and how can its benefit be sustained beyond the initial 3 or say 5 years?
See, I think, one is that, the government steps in at times when there is when there is distress. So clearly in the case when there was a global pandemic, the worst hit where people on the ground were doing all this, doing on the ground, doing businesses or offering services where they had to be in contact with several other people. So, this, and particularly street vendors were very badly hit. So the government came out proactively with this scheme. But as we are saying, there are several issues which, SHUBOMOY said that, few states garnering it, reach of banks being limited, innovation required, how channels of delivery channels can be innovatively thought about or expanded, the geography being expanded, because we have seen that the bad loans amongst the small borrowers, fortunately and ironically, the bad loans are very less amongst the small borrowers. These are people which, I think they know that if they pay back, they have a credit history, they have to be in the business, they can get a higher loan, they can slowly scale up. So that has happened in Svanidhi, at least in the first 2 tranches. So when I look at the data, it doesn't seem that too many people are taking the 3rd tranche of, say, up to 50,000 rupees. So the numbers are, tapering off at the 3rd installment, 3rd term loan, which Svanidhi talks about. So up to 50,000, I think that amount should go up in due course, and that requires, proactive reaching out.
Absolutely.
So I think, and then the second part was about the 7% subsidy. While I understand that, the government's outgo is very less, for this to be massively scalable, so the government can eventually look at it as building a huge repository of credit history of, such small vendors and giving them incentives based on their payment history. So, instead of 7%, say, direct interest subsidy, which continues forever, I think it is important, and which this government has always done, that, they have never believed in really dole-outs, in cash handouts. They have their own mechanisms. This government has its own mechanisms of intervening and incentivizing people. And, that's why I think this Svanidhi scheme can be expanded when the government gradually kind of reduces the interest subsidy, makes it an already a scheme, probably improves the channels of delivery, and incentivizes people for timely payment. I think that probably is my, say, long-term plan for this scheme.
And as we enter the concluding stage of this program, I want to take your concluding comments on that one crisis was when we saw in pandemic, but another began after COVID, when people were looking for solutions on how they can fix their derailed livelihood. We can't deny that the informal sector and street vendors were affected the most. But now when we hear the stories of beneficiaries of PM Svanidhi, how they are able to earn good with dignity, got Atmanirbhar. Mr. Iyer, how do you see this change in context of the India story that the world is already talking about?
Yeah, I think, this in the informal employment sector, these are, avenues which would be made open given the size of the Indian population itself. And, given that, we are a 140 crore kind of population, I think that, the street vendors getting more formalized, getting into social security mechanisms, I think those are the ways forward that, it is not just working capital loan where they build certain savings for themselves so that they are kind of taken care of as they grow old. So I think that is one aspect of social security which I think the government can slowly, because these are, given the jam trinity that we have, there are so many interlinkages that one can think about where they become part of the national pension scheme also. So I think there are many externalities which one can benefit from Svanidhi scheme and the database that Svanidhi scheme creates. And I think it is for the banks to step in. It is for the governments to state governments to push these things, because I know for a fact in this, state level banking committee, which SLBCs, which we call, in banking committee meetings, there are certain targets which each district magistrate or district collector can put in. I think these can be very proactively pushed in those smaller meetings, and I think it is easily scalable, and it can be many layers can be built on top of that.
Indeed. And my question is same to you, Mr. Bhattacharjee, in very short. What's your say on this?
I was looking at the gender distribution across states, and I come back to the first point that I was making. If you look at the southern states, there's an amazingly huge, the women outnumber men almost in the ratio of 2:1. It tapers off very badly in the northern Indian part. So whereas in Tamil Nadu, it is like 66-34, in Telangana, it's the same rate. But whereas when you go to states like, say, Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, these numbers actually get skewed. And I would say that is where a lot of work can be done in terms of popularizing Svanidhi, bringing more women in these states into the fold. I think that there will be a huge, and we'll see a fascinating change in the Indian economic structure if these steps are taken.
And I do agree with your point, sir, as we know that under Prime Minister's vision, the government right from the first day tried to obliterate the difficulties that the poor and the lower middle class have to face owing to the lockdown and to the impact of the pandemic. After PM Svanidhi, this is the first time that thousands and lakhs of street vendors are directly connected to the system so that they can start getting the benefit. The aim of the Svanidhi Yojana is to provide Swarojgar, Swalambhan and Swabhiman to the street vendors. We hope that now, after the extension of the lending through PM Svanidhi till December of 2024, it would assist in facilitating the access to formal credit channels, provide an assured source of credit to help them plan their business expansion, increase the adoption of digital transaction, reducing the impact of potential non-performing assets on the lending institutions, and also provide holistic socio-economic upliftment for the street vendors and their families. With your insightful inputs, we conclude the program. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhattacharjee and Mr. IYER, for joining us on Akashvani.
Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on 3 years of PM Svanidhi, a transformational microcredit scheme for street vendors. The participants were SHUBOMOY Bhattacharjee and VAIDYANATHAN IYER, economic analysts. Moderator was OMVESH UPADHYAY. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 92890 94044.